Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. Today's guest, April Lockhart, is a recent obsession of mine. You might recognize her from her beautifully crafted social media content where she shares videos like a day in the life with one hand. You might know her for her fashion hauls, her amazing sense of style, her adorable haircut, the list goes on and on. The moment I found this girl online, I instantly gravitated towards her. She was born with a limb difference and she has one hand and actually only has about half of her left arm. And her story of how she has recently, in her late 20s, embraced this disability wholeheartedly is very warming, so unique, and even for someone that has two hands and doesn't have a limb difference, it's surprisingly relatable. She's an absolute breath of fresh air on the internet, and as I tell her in this interview, she's been one of my favorite follows recently. Everything about her page makes me smile, and I'm very excited to share her with you or to introduce you to her if this is your first time hearing her name. We really do focus the crux of today's interview around her limb difference because that's something that she's just been really leaning heavily into on her own platforms and kind of building her online persona around. But I did want to make sure that she's aware and also that all of you are aware as listeners of the fact that I know this girl has so many other amazing and defining qualities that don't have anything to do with her disability. We also do get into her fashion sense at the end of the interview. She's a musician. She's clearly just so incredibly talented in so many other ways. And her video content, specifically the brand partnerships she's done, are so well done. She's just an amazing creator. If you're loving the podcast, as always, please leave us a written review and a rating on either Apple or Spotify. Drop a comment on YouTube. Whatever you do, DM it over to me, and in return, I will send you a personalized voice message as a thank you for your time. All right, let's dive into today's episode of the Real Stuff Podcast with April Lockhart. April Lockhart, welcome to the Real Stuff Podcast. I have to be honest, you have been my most recent favorite new follow on social media.
Oh my God, I'm so honored.
Everything about your page is engaging, interesting. You obviously have this limb difference that sets you apart that I'm fascinated with. But on the side of that, you're also just such a fashion girly. You have the best style. We have so many things to talk about. And I first want to welcome you to the show and ask how you're doing today.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm great today. It's pouring rain outside in Nashville. I just got back from a really amazing weekend with a nonprofit for people with limb differences. So I'm feeling recharged. I'm happy.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your time and for coming on. I don't know how to think about the fact that I'm centering this interview around your limb difference because there's a part of me that was saying, she probably doesn't want to talk about that. You know, she's got so much else going for her that this is not her only defining characteristic. And I'm assuming everyone that interviews you wants to talk about it. How do you feel about doing interviews when the primary topic is your limb difference?
I think for a long time, I tried to make it all about anything but my limb difference. And now I'm coming to terms with I actually want to talk more about it. So I think it's a good time, probably because for so long in my life, I spent so much energy needing validation that I'm cool and interesting aside from the fact that I have one hand and I can do anything that everybody else can do. And I can be in the same rooms or dress the same way. And now it's interesting because I'm making it such a bigger part of my platform. And even just my husband is yeah, but you do all these other things. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I think it's okay to now really lean into the fact that I have one hand and this is a key part of my life.
And we'll get into that a little later as we dive into your career and being a content creator because, I have thoughts from the outside of how it feels to look at your page versus someone else's page. So we will get there. But I do want you to take us back to the background of your life. You were born with this limb difference. So it's not like you got attacked by a shark or cut off in some machinery. This is how you came out of the womb. And I would love to hear what that feels like from your standpoint of being brought up this way and this just always being your normal.
I was a really bubbly kid, and I think nothing else when you're born like this. And there was really no internet, no community. Now it's really cool and healing for me as an adult to see kids grow up so connected to other kids with limb differences where I didn't see anyone with a limb difference for most of my life. Growing up was interesting. I would go through phases of life where I was really comfortable and then I would be really insecure and hide my arm. And so I think, when you're truly a kid, like 5, 6 and under, you're just blissfully unaware. Life was normal. Maybe people would make comments, but it was just like right over my head. Then 9, 10, preteens, teens are really tough. Like kids are starting to ask you questions or, you're starting to be interested in dating people. And that's the part where it's like, oh, wow, I do look different. I'm the only person in this room who looks different. And I know I'm a great person, but kids are super judgmental. Like, will someone want to date me? Will people want to be friends with me? And so it was like this constant feeling of, do I feel safe? Okay, yes, I do. Now I can be myself. If I don't feel safe yet, like I'm just going to wear long sleeves. I'm just going to hide a bit. And then, once I feel like people accept me, okay, like I can sort of like let the wall down.
In the 90s, when you were being born, was a limb difference the type of thing that a doctor could see on a scan? Did your parents know you were going to come out with one hand?
No, they couldn't see on an ultrasound. So, my mom and dad said they were like in a straight, like my mom was like, I was in a coma for like 4 days, just like had no idea of like what was happening around me. My dad's like, I'd never cried in my life. I was like breaking down in tears, like had all of my brothers come over. And that was like, he says that's like one of the true moments in life where really his whole family came together around him. He's like never had a moment like that. Now they can see, like now typically doctors can see on an ultrasound around like 20, 22 weeks or something.
I'm curious if your parents, they talk about how they were scared or how they felt when you came out. Did they ever talk about what was making them feel that way? Was it their worry about how you were going to be able to be in the world?
I think it was like, they didn't even know what that meant. So they were like, is something like really deeply physically wrong with her? And there wasn't like a ton of information about it then. So I think they were like, okay, is she like safe? Is she even going to be okay? Like, we don't know what this means. And then I think there was like, oh gosh, like this is our first kid. Like what's happening? Yes. Like psychologically and emotionally, is she going to be okay the rest of her life? And I think they didn't understand, like, is this something that like hurts? Are you in pain every day? Like, which no, for people who don't understand, like a congenital limb difference when you're born like this, like nothing hurts. Like everything feels completely normal. I just don't have like my left hand fully formed versus like an amputee or something like that. Like they may have pain. So I think they were just like, what's happening? Like, is she going to be good? And now they look back on it like, God, why did we ever worry? Like, we have to worry way more about our other 2 kids who are completely normal. But yeah.
So after your parents got past the initial shock and your dad had his brothers come and you were just growing up normally and you're this bubbly girl, how do you remember them talking to you about it and just framing to you what you might want to expect in the world moving around with this?
I think they had no idea how to parent. And I say that with so much love, like they were great parents, but they said, early on they went to a support group for people like this. And it was just like such a Debbie Downer. They were like, we had to immediately stop going. We were like, this is killing the vibe. Everybody in here is just like complaining about their kid and like doesn't know what to do. And they were like, that's not how we want to approach this. And I think they always were open to talking about it, but really let me take the lead, which was that good or bad? I don't know. Because I think a lot of my life, I just didn't want to talk about it. I was very independent, wanted to always figure out a way to do the thing I wanted to do, whether that was play guitar when I was 12 or do gymnastics or do cheerleading. Like I was like, I'm just going to do it. If we need to figure out a way, like I needed to get a prosthetic for guitar, they would figure it out. But I never wanted to like sit down for the conversation that was like, you're just like everybody, like, and so I think I just shut that down always. Is that good or bad? I don't know.
When you were growing up and you were in school, was your school fully accessible to you? Or did you feel like there were activities that you absolutely just could not partake in?
I think like physical activities, I always had like a learning curve with, which would be just like gym class in school, like never actual classes. But the good part was I went to a private school and stayed with a lot of the same friends that I was with from like first grade to like 10th grade. So it was sort of that safety thing of like, these people know me, they know I have one hand. So I was really comfortable around them. And so I think like we never acknowledged it because we were friends. Like most of us were friends from so early on. Like if it was ever brought up, they would be like, oh yeah, I forgot April doesn't have a hand.
I want to hear about that time in your life when you do remember feeling embarrassed by it and when you remember hiding it. When was the first moment when you remember feeling that way?
I can remember in like first grade, I think the teacher like announced it in class, like, hey, you know, like April is born with one hand. And like, I don't remember how she framed it. If she said, if you have any questions, let me know. Or like, you know, I just want to like tell you this up front. I'm sure she was saying it in the most loving way possible, but I can remember feeling like, oh my God, why are you guys doing this? And, you know, I'm sure kids would ask questions for sure, as kids do, that would make me uncomfortable. I think really when I started understanding like, oh, I'm different was probably like entering middle school, like 5th, 6th grade was like when it really started to like make me anxious.
I mean, at that time in a kid's life, no matter what is making you different, I feel like no one wants to be too different or stand out in any way. I've heard you talk about in that earlier part of your life, specifically with job interviews or with dating, how you always actually tried to hide it until you got to know someone or until you got the job. And then like a week into the job, you would reveal that you had one hand. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Do you want me to start with dating or job first?
Let's start with job and then we'll move into dating.
Okay. This is so hilarious. And I haven't asked any of my prior bosses this, but for sure in job interviews, I would always wear like a long sleeve blazer, just come in, you know, like you're sitting at a table, they really can't see anything. How would they know? And I would really wait till probably a week or two after to like slowly teeter the line of like 3/4 sleeves or like poking my hand out when I was typing. And like, I don't ever remember having a conversation with any of my bosses about it. Still to this day, like, because obviously I left my corporate job about a year ago now, like, I don't think we ever talked about it. Probably by my choice, because I never wanted that to be a reason I did or didn't get hired or, you know, I think perception plays into things a lot more than people think. And so I really wanted my resume to speak for itself. But gosh, it was such a weird thing. And I'm like, they probably thought this is so crazy. And like, how would they ever know? I mean, all of them now consume and like interact with my content. So now they know, and I'm sure they like love it. And I'm sure they think back on me, hopefully as like a great employee and think it's like so wholesome now. But gosh, I kind of like feel bad that I scammed them.
I wouldn't call it scamming. I really like the way you framed it because I could understand the worry that people might hire you because of it, because it's almost like this makes our team diverse, or, you know, this is a good look for our company to have a disability person on our staff. And I can understand you just wanting to get the job out of your own merit and deserving it, limb difference aside.
Yeah, for sure.
On the note, let's dive into dating. What was that like growing up?
Dating was super anxiety inducing with one hand. I think as soon as I started like liking boys in 5th, 6th grade, I was like, oh God, I hate it all. I hate even thinking about trying to date someone. Again, being in the same school for so many years and so many people already knowing that inherently about me was helpful. But I also felt like, looking back on the guys that I dated, I felt like I dated below my pay grade, probably, which says maybe something about how I viewed myself then. Like, I liked to date guys, maybe we weren't in the same league, so that maybe they thought like, wow, this amazing girl, like she's so amazing in all these ways. And yeah, she has one hand, but like, I think I liked how they sort of like glorified me, if that makes sense. And so it was scary for sure. I remember specifically a guy that I was really into in maybe my freshman year of high school. We were like talking. He was super cute. I think he was actually a year younger than me. And we just would hang out all the time. Like, I knew his sister, and we would like, I remember like hanging out in his basement. We were like holding hands. We were like kissy, touch it, like very much, I guess you would say it was dating, but we weren't officially dating. You know how high school is. And I just like remember the moment he was like, we can't tell anybody. Like, I don't really want to like, he didn't outright say like, this is because of your hand, but I knew it was. I knew he was like embarrassed to be seen with me, and like just kind of found out from his friends or like our circles that he just was like totally embarrassed about me. And so that was hard, thinking like, again, in my mind, I'm thinking like, but I'm out of your league. I'm like giving you this chance and you're still embarrassed about me. And so I took a lot of that into like future dating experiences. I was in a really long-term relationship before I met my husband, like 4 years in dating someone long distance. And it ended so badly. He was cheating on me with like a zillion girls. Again, it was like long distance. I know that's like a whole nother story, but really funny. And I think after that, you know, here I was in my early 20s, like, I don't want to have to do this all again. Like, I'm in New York City. Like, I could not fathom online dating. And I think I laugh about that with people and sort of make a joke of it. Like, oh, I couldn't imagine online dating. I'm so glad I met my husband, which thank God I did. I am glad. But I couldn't even think about like, would I disclose I have a disability if I was online dating? How could I not? Like, would I just post pictures of my face and then meet someone and then have to reveal this after the fact? Like, that was so terrifying to me, which I think is sad to say that in my early 20s, I was still that insecure after going through waves of finding myself, losing myself, finding myself. You know, it was tough.
With the whole concept of selecting guys that were, quote, below your pay grade or people that you maybe felt like this is the only person I have a chance with, did that mean that you deeply felt that having one hand made you less of a catch?
I think probably, yeah. I think I did feel that way. I definitely don't feel that way anymore, but I think I assumed, which could have been my lived experience because guys had been embarrassed about me or guys would look at me differently, like that they thought that was unattractive. And I can understand that it looks very different. Like you look at someone who has a hand like mine and it looks like very not normal.
For people who are watching on YouTube, can we see your little arm?
Yes, you can.
Here it is. And by the way, I heard you say that you call it your little arm.
I do. I call it my little arm. People call it lucky fin. People call it their limb difference or their nub, or some people call it their stump. I could never personally, but
not the word for you.
Not the word for me. It has such a negative connotation, but yeah, I just call it my little arm.
Hearing about how people have reacted and your fear of how people are going to react if you just reveal this, say, on a date or at a job interview. Do you remember anything ever happening specifically? Any standout lines that people said or overhearing things in public that maybe made you have this worry?
I think probably it was mostly like looks and stares of like people like, or, you know, a lot of it's kids saying like, oh my God, what happened? Or even adults saying like, oh my God, what happened? You know, are you okay? Does it hurt? Like, it's as silly as like getting a massage. I'll like lay down and the massage therapist will be like, like, and just give me a look. Like, she's like, are you good? You know? And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine. It was never like really people being super mean. I mean, I got a ton of online trolls of people saying like, just the stupidest jokes, like you lost your hand or like, do you need a hand or like all this silly stuff. But that to me, they're like not real people, even though I guess they are. But no, I think it's mostly the looks and probably just like experiences with guys. Every woman I feel like has had an experience with guys cheating on them. But I feel like there was like my high school boyfriend cheated on me. Then there was like a couple guys in the high school, early college that just like were totally embarrassed about me. You know, my long-term relationship before I met my husband cheated on me. So it's like, it takes a stab at your self-worth. And I think for any girl, they would come to their own conclusion of whatever their insecurity is. It's because of this reason about me. Right. And so for me, that was always like, oh, it must be about my hand. Maybe he just wants this other girl who looks more normal.
You probably already know that the best way to learn a language is through immersion, to live where the language is spoken and to use it every single day, which is why Michael and I made the decision to move our family to Italy in 2025. Okay. Just kidding. I couldn't even say that with a straight face. Not really. I wish. If uprooting your life and moving to a new place just also isn't in the cards for you, then the second best way that you can learn a language is with Babbel. Babbel is the science-backed language app that I keep hearing rave reviews about because it actually does work. They have these 10-minute lessons, which are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. I've been getting some of my Spanish back from high school, which has been very useful given that Milo's nanny speaks Spanish as a first language, and it's really helped us bridge that language gap. And I have a special limited time deal that is only for the listeners of our show. So right now you can get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/LucieFink. Remember, this is only for our listeners, and it's up to 60% off at babbel.com/LucieFink, spelled BABBEL.com/LUCIEFINK. Rules and restrictions may apply. What is the quote right thing or thing at all to say when you meet someone that has a limb difference? And I know you cannot speak to everyone who has a disability, or everyone's going to feel differently about what they want people to say or not. Do you prefer when people talk to you, notice your limb difference, and literally ignore it and just move on with the day? Or do you prefer when people ask you about it?
I think as long as it's like with kindness, I don't mind either way. Like, obviously, I think people want to be treated normally. I think if it's approached in like a positive way, like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I also know somebody who has a limb difference. Like, were you born like this? Or, how did it happen? Something like that. Totally great. I'm happy with it. Or even just like, oh, how did that happen? Whatever. Totally fine with it. I think it's all about the approach instead of like fear and like, approaching it with like a positive tone is great. Or if people notice it, like smile and don't say anything, great.
Now that you've met so many other people in the disability community, and I'm sure everyone who has a limb difference got there from a different way. Mm-hmm. Some were born with it, some acquired it in their lifetime. From what you know, do you feel as if being born with a limb difference versus having something traumatic happen in the middle of your life and losing a limb, do you then view the difference differently? Because I could see someone who was born with two hands and then got in an accident. It's almost like they might have a feeling of, well, this was an accident and this isn't how I was born. Versus in your case, you're born with the difference. And so it's more a part of you and your identity.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's a great question. I have never thought about that, but I think for sure, would part of me like to say like, oh yeah, I got in a shark accident. Like that's kind of cool versus like, yeah, I was born with this. Yeah, I think you phrased it perfectly. Like for sure, it becomes innately more part of your identity. Do I think one is any less hard? Absolutely not. I think I couldn't imagine now having to relearn literally everything at a different age in life. That's really hard. And coming to terms with like, you look different overnight. And,
right.
You may have never had trouble dating and now you're relearning who you are. But yeah, like having that sort of like excuse or out, it's not an excuse, but having that like something else to blame it on other than like, just that's who you are, I think like in some terms feels nice.
But I am glad to hear that it doesn't feel worse to be born with it because, I'm happy to hear that people who are born with a limb difference don't feel innately like they had a glitch or, something's wrong with them versus it just happening to you by accident in your life. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. One is not less hard. I think I just talked about this with some friends this weekend, but, when you're born with it, you have to sort of be like the adult your whole life. You have to like be ready to explain yourself at any moment, like to other kids, to teachers, to parents, to anybody. Like, so you're innately resilient, independent, well-spoken, I find. Like you're just constantly explaining your disability to people from the get-go versus an amputee or something like that's hard for a whole nother ballgame of reasons. Like you're relearning life at a totally different age.
Anyone who follows you on social media has seen that you can do pretty much everything. I mean, I have seen you guys got to go watch her videos where she's just living her life as a content creator because she's opening wine bottles. She is applying mascara. You can actually use your little arm to hold many things. You can button clothes. You can zip zippers. It doesn't seem to be that much of a physical impediment in terms of what you can do. And obviously some people who have a limb difference are missing the whole arm and don't have as much traction as you might have even with your little arm. But can you just talk us through what your everyday looks like, how you notice now that you have a husband, you live with someone, you see someone with two hands, what really are the differences? What is hard for you in everyday life and what can you not do?
I think, opening certain things, like now I lean on my husband way more than and now I find myself like so codependent. It's embarrassing. And I just choose not to do things. I think it's probably like super specific things of like opening certain jars or lifting weights can be like tough for sure. I feel like I need to find some adaptive ways to like lift weights. I'll just kind of like hold it in certain moves in Pilates I just can't do and I'll have to adapt otherwise. I never learned how to ride a bike. That's one interesting fact. I'm sure people with limb differences can ride a bike, but could not make sense to me my whole life. I tried as a kid, as a teenager. I've tried so many times. I just fall flat on my face. So other than that, I found most ways to do things. I played guitar as a teenager. I did gymnastics and cheerleading. I couldn't be a bass. I had to always be a flyer.
Right. Well, being a flyer is fun. So
for sure.
You got the good end of that bargain.
Till somebody drops you on the floor.
Can you paint the nails on your right hand?
I can. Yeah, I can paint. I hold the top of the brush in my elbow and kind of just work backwards.
And I did hear you say that if you ever go to the nail salon, you get half price on manicures. So that's a perk.
I get half price. Sometimes it's awkward to I never ask. I just view the bill and make sure it's right. But yeah, that's one fun fact.
Did you ever need to use or choose to use a prosthetic hand or arm?
I wore prosthetics as a really young kid and hated it. It was really heavy and sweaty. And so I would just fling it off. I tried it in gymnastics and it was hard. I think it's weird not feeling what is touching the ground. It's to not feel your hands touching the ground if you're doing a back handspring or something is really a weird sensation. So you don't know if you're missing the mark, and that I think always led to me hurting myself. So I decided to do it without it.
So when you do something like a back handspring and say you're doing a running round off back handspring, do you just do everything with your one hand?
Yeah.
Okay, that is an Olympic feat right there.
I can't do it anymore. I probably stopped being able to do it at 20, but yeah, I could.
I would love to see a video of that.
I will try to pull one out of the archives.
I know you mentioned Pilates or weights. How do you keep that left arm, the upper part of the arm, strong and keep strength in it if you can't really grip things well?
I could if I put a bala band around my arm or something, I could lift it up. I also just naturally carry everything on my left shoulder, bags, backpacks, anything. I don't know why. I think a lot of people with limb differences do the same. Maybe it kind of balances their shoulders out. Definitely it's weaker than my right arm for sure, but it still maintains it's okay for now, I guess.
And how about that right arm and right hand? Does it get tired from doing double the amount of things?
Not really for me yet. This is another thing I've been recently reading in is people call it overuse pain, which my friends tell me I'll be happy to start feeling in my mid-30s. So I'm looking forward to that. At this moment, I don't have pain.
Do you remember when in your life your feelings started to change from maybe feeling embarrassed, wanting to hide this, you feeling lesser than in relationships, to where you are today?
Social media helped a lot, it's interesting. The things that I accredit to helping a lot, most people would be oh, that's interesting. And I would never want to lean on social media as my identity or lean on my husband as my identity. But I do look at these key moments in my life as helping free me to really find myself. Because I think a lot of energy was spent, when you're dating, a lot of energy is extroverted trying to prove your worth to someone or find someone or just you're constantly searching for who's going to like me or whatever. And that can be with social media too. If you're trying to build a platform or you're trying to, I was doing really boring fashion content throughout my corporate career before I started highlighting my disability. And I just was I don't know, I'm very much a person that believes in everything happens for a reason. Everybody is a way that they are for a reason. And so I was this is my reason. And I'm kind of like, why am I not talking about it? I started a series a couple years ago called Normalizing Disabled Fashion Girlies, which was just like basically my own outfit videos, like just outfit of the day, number 1 of 30, whatever, but highlighting like the way that I would button my pants or tie my shoes or button a top, showing my limb difference, which was really the first time in years that I had. So I think the positive reaction from that freed me to like really start to become comfortable again. And there were periods of my life, I don't want to be like for 25 years of my life, I wasn't comfortable. There were so many periods of my life. Like a lot of people don't even know that I used to do music as a teenager. I would obviously play guitar with one hand. Like I was on a singing show on ABC, like, which was very much like public that I had one hand and was playing guitar with one hand. Of course, that was like probably their whole—
Which show were you on?
Their whole angle. It was called Rising Star. It was only on for 1 season.
I feel like I remember it. I gotta go on YouTube and search for that.
Embarrassing. But Kesha, Ludacris, and Brad Paisley were the judges. It was basically like The Voice knockoff. Clearly, it didn't go far. But
did you get far in the competition?
I was top 8.
That is a big deal, April.
Super embarrassing. You'll find me in my— what hasn't changed is my fashion was so stupidly outrageous. I was wearing like space buns. Insane.
I'm going to look for it right after this.
Yeah, please. So anyways, I think there were definitely periods in my life where I was comfortable and very public about my hand. And then college, getting jobs like would revert me back into hiding, I think. And so being really public about it on social media sort of like forced me to look inwardly. And I think also being in a really secure relationship, getting married to someone who like could care less about, if I have a disability or not, gave me the freedom to be like, okay, now I can really acknowledge this is who I am. Now what?
What was it like meeting Scott, and how did that go in terms of revealing your limb difference to him?
It's really funny. So we met at a housewarming party and we were instantly connected. But that was totally a period of my life where I was in hiding. I like was wearing a denim jacket and like dress, and people probably know this. It's already on the internet. Like we kissed the first night we met, we were just like instantly attached. And he came back to my apartment and then grabbed my sleeve. Like he pulled me and was like, "Where'd your hand go?" Like kind of like joking around. And I was like frozen because I was like thinking we're not going to get to this place for like 2 weeks. Like we're not going to have this conversation for like 2 weeks. I could probably beat around the bush. And then I was just like, I was born like that. And he also, like, now we look back on, now I asked him about it. Like, what did you think in that moment? And he was like, I was frozen. You were frozen. We were both like, he thought he was making a joke. Like I had my jacket over my shoulders or something. Like I had a hand, but he couldn't see it. So he was like, "Where'd your hand go?" And then I was like, "I was born that way." And then he was like, "Oh crap." I was like, I'm joking with this girl and she really doesn't have a hand. And he felt so awful. And he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And we just like carried on. And I think for the first probably month, 2 months that we were dating and seeing each other, I still was super private about it until, we saw like this is going somewhere. And he just would ask me about it. "Hey, why do you hide your hand? You don't have to do that. You can be super comfortable around me. Like, I know you don't have a hand. It doesn't bother me." And I was like, okay, and I still was like, it was definitely a process of like becoming comfortable with myself, but he was super helpful in that. We've almost been married 5 years, been together for like 6 or 7. We got married pretty quickly. Like now is like the first year where I'm really getting involved with the community. Like I think for so many years, we acknowledged it. You have one hand. We didn't really like go further than that. Of course, I became really comfortable. I started talking about it on social media, my own lived experience, but I never really like got around other people who looked like this or like showed that I do care about being part of this community. And so I think this is the first year that I've done that. And it's been cool for him to like observe.
Going into this content creation world that you are now blooming in, you worked in the beauty industry. You were in marketing for 6 years before you transitioned to being a content creator. What was that transition like, and what made you quit a job to start doing this on your own?
Yeah. So I worked for a couple beauty brands, the French skincare brand Caudalie, and then most recently the clean makeup brand Ilia, right out of college. And in college, I interned for Tarte and Victoria's Secret, doing like PR marketing, which became specifically influencer marketing as the industry sort of niched down. And people always ask me, like, did you think you would, like, did you have this in mind? Like, you knew what influencers could make, so you're like, I'm going to get into this industry. And really never it was like that. I don't know. You also have a similar background, so I'm sure, you know, you have your own experience. But for me, I was like, yeah, wow, influencers do make a lot of money. But I never thought about like, I'm going to do this full time. Even my boss joked with me a year before I quit. She was like, don't ever go quitting on me, like to become a full-time influencer. And I laughed because I was like, I wish I could, but I really can't. Like, that's never going to happen for me. My growth was really slow. Like, again, I had been posting content for years that was super boring and hiding my hand. And then I started opening up about it and started growing, but never thought about this is going to be a full-time career for me. And I loved my job. I love people. I love organizing events. I love being the host. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be a CMO one day. Like, that's my career path. I'm just going to keep working the corporate ladder. And I loved it. Like, it was a really fun job. It started to become, you know, financially, I was making so much more than my corporate job and having to say no to things, having to say no to trip opportunities or shoot opportunities that I was like, okay, I love this job, but am I going to build somebody else's dream or am I going to build my own dream? And I had to just make the decision, like, you know, this has so much more opportunity. I don't even know what this could become, but I can't say no to like more money and more opportunity.
Were you just starting to post fashion content and videos of your own on your own platform while you were an employee at these other companies?
Yeah. So I would say my first job, it was like written into my contract that I could not post other beauty brands. So for a while, that was pretty like discouraging. Like, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? I was posting a lot about beauty at the time. And so I was like, kind of took a hiatus for like 2 years. And then when I had started at Ilia, there was really nothing about it in my contract. So I was like, maybe I should start doing this again. Maybe I should start posting. And so I was posting. And then I would say maybe a year and a half prior to quitting was when I started talking about my disability and really started seeing growth on the platform, started seeing like more consistent income. And I would say I had like consistent income for about a year before I quit. That was like surpassed my salary. So then it was just sort of like, it doesn't make sense.
And now you are signed with Digital Brand Architects.
Yes.
DBA, which is an incredible talent management company. How did that come about? Did they approach you or did you kind of pitch yourself to them?
So I did like the classic goodbye email for my work job and was like, hey, Emily. And I didn't want to be like to everybody, like, I'm going to go do this now. Like, if you have any opportunities for me, because that's not really cool. But I just did say, you know, I'm leaving to freelance full time and do content, and kind of like left my handle, my email in my signature. And yeah, their president, Vanessa, had reached out to me and said, hey, your name came up in a prospecting meeting. Would you ever be interested? I had been with like a small agent that was based here in Nashville before, but very much like we were sort of at the same level. She was doing her own thing and I was doing mine. And it just sort of like wasn't the right fit in the long term. So yeah, I had a conversation with her. I think having a corporate background too, I was like, oh, maybe I can just do this by myself for a while. And I think it was like the perfect colliding of times to say yes to working with them.
I know you don't want to dive into too many specifics figure-wise and money-wise, but can you give some sort of equation or factor of how the salary from working in digital marketing differs from what you can bring in now on your own as a content creator?
Yeah, I would say I'm making like 6 to 7 times my salary.
Wow. So good choice to leave.
I was like, as hard as the decision was, I mean, you can't.
You know, I understand it's actually not a normal thing for creators to be asked in public spaces, how much are you making? What are your brand deals look like? And every creator I've spoken to kind of has a different reason. If they don't want to share numbers, they have some really interesting reasons of why that's like a boundary that they've set on social media and why they don't want to talk about it. Do you have any thoughts? Like, is there anything that comes to mind of like specific, you know, maybe you don't want a brand to hear you say a rate and then hold you to it, or maybe you just feel uncomfortable talking about it because money wasn't talked about that much in your life growing up? You know, what do you feel like is your reason for wanting to keep that private?
I think it's just like important for me to stay like grounded and relatable for people. So I never want to be like, and I'm not like a lavish spender by any means. Like this is all very new to me. And I'm like, a lot of people say like influencer money is like monopoly money. You're just like, what is happening? Like, and it all happens really fast, I think. And you never know how long it will last. So yeah, I think my reasoning too is like, I want to be cautious with brands, and you also don't know how quickly rates can change or, disappear. So I think I just try to like tread lightly.
I get it. And I think the whole money subject, specifically with influencers, it's such a strange world because you're right. People have such a perception of it from the outside. And because what we do for a job is so fun and rewarding intrinsically and also lucrative, it's almost like, there's a little fear of how long can this possibly last for? Am I going to be able to do this long term? This is just too good to be true. And B, that element of almost feeling bad. Like, how can I be doing well if I'm happy? Because my perception of making a lot of money is that you have to grind and hustle and have no life.
Yeah, for sure. Because I look back at like, coworkers or even myself in a corporate job, like how would I view, you get an email and somebody quotes you more than your entire salary, like right. For a TikTok, like that doesn't feel good, and I'm so used to working, and I work so hard now too. Like I work till 11:30 p.m. every day. Like, do I tell people that? No, but do I work from the morning I'm up till the second I wake up till the second I go to bed. And I love every minute of it. Like some people are very clock in, clock out. I was never like that. And I still am never like that. But yeah, it's like you feel bad that you have a fun job where you can also make money. And I never want to like rub that in people's faces.
Especially on the internet where everyone from around the world is watching content, and it's kind of the general worldwide sentiment for people to be miserable and unhappy and overworked and underpaid. And then here are these influencers. Like, I don't blame people who are just want to bring all influencers down and want this to stop.
No, I get it. Like I would feel the same. Like sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, I look at myself and I'm like, yeah, I would hate
what
that
am
too.
I doing?
Yeah.
How did I get this life? So without going into specific numbers at all, I'm curious, do you find that you have kind of an abundance mindset about money or more of a scarcity mindset?
I think I have a scarcity mindset a lot of the times. Like I'm very, is this going to end tomorrow? Like, and so I think that's why I don't always like spend lavishly or want to live this like extravagant lifestyle. I think I'm like trying to that TikTok that's like, go on the trip, like the money will return. Like, and I do travel. Like I love to travel, but I'm like, will it return? That's like sort of me. And I want to have an abundance mindset. So I'm like, I'm retraining myself to have an abundance mindset. I also am like, like every influencer, like what can I do beyond this, beyond content? Like what's next after that, which I'm still very much figuring out. But, realistically, I feel like I do have more of a scarcity mindset, and maybe that's how I grew up or whatever factors lead into it. But I'm always like, this could disappear tomorrow.
Do you find that mindset leads you to maybe say yes to things that you probably should have said no to just because you're afraid of turning down any sort of monetary payment?
Sometimes, but I do try to like, I guess in that way, I maybe have grown to realize like at least for the next few years, hopefully this will like continue. And then I have to figure it out beyond that. But I try not to like say yes to everything, because now I really do feel like, I'm sure you feel the same. Like you have to maintain that integrity. Like it's all you have.
Yes. We had a guest on this podcast. Her name was Nitika Chopra, and she had a chronic illness. Yeah. And she made this really interesting remark about how people with chronic illnesses really struggle to make money. And she's found in the content creation space that any creators with chronic illness, it's just been an impediment. Do you feel having a disability and, having a limb difference has led to you in the content creation space struggling to make money? Or on the contrary, has it opened up opportunities for you?
Opportunity-wise, I tend to have an abundance mindset. I also think it's really about the quality of what the content you produce. I think if you're producing quality content and you have a disability, you're primed to be a great choice for brands. I don't know that that's always like why I've gotten a job. I would hope that it's like because I'm creating really clear content with good edits, like good storytelling, like the whole story is really important to me in all the content that I produce. So I think that like fits with what brands are looking for sometimes. You know, my advice always to other members of the disabled community, like creating content too, is just like make sure the content you're creating is good, you know? And that goes back to, I think, me always trying to prove myself that I'm good beyond my disability. But it is like you have to create stuff that's worth consuming.
And you do absolutely create content that's worth consuming. If anyone goes to April's page, you will see whether it's an editorial piece of content or a piece of sponsored content, your videos are engaging. They are really well put together. It's just like a breath of fresh air. Everything you create is authentic. Like your voiceovers, the way you tell stories, it will be an ad, but it doesn't sound like an ad. And it just sounds like you're chatting with us. And it is really, really well done.
Thank you.
When you were younger, would you say there was a time when you would have said, I wish that I had two hands?
For sure. When I was younger, absolutely. I would like pray to have two hands and just like be a normal kid.
And now, would you ever say that you wish you didn't have this limb difference?
No. Someone asked me that this weekend, actually, for the first time in a really long time. And I was like, no, because like, what would I be doing? I don't know. My life would be so different. Yeah. I don't want to call it a blessing, but I think it's like my purpose, you know, now to be this person that other people can see as has a limb difference, but is also just really cool and normal. And I think a lot of the disabled community avoids the word inspirational because, you know, not every disabled person wants to be inspirational. Not every disabled person wants to be like praised just for like leaving their house for the day. And being more aspirational instead of inspirational, like, you know, how we follow really cool influencers, a lot of the like OG fashion influencers you would call aspirational. You love their style, their lifestyle, and you like aspire to be like that. So I think it's like being aspirational over inspirational. I don't mind the word inspirational. Like my life is wholesome and I just love to surround myself with wholesome people and good things. And I have loved, you know, getting kids involved even in the last few months and like surrounding myself with just like little people with limb differences. But I think ultimately it's like creating that aspirational view of people with limb differences and disabilities.
Speaking of those little kids, can you tell us about the Disabled Fashion Girly pop-up and how that came about and what it is?
Yeah, I mean, what it is, who knows? But the first time I was really around other people with limb differences was this April, like in a vast room. And it was a picnic for kids through a foundation here in Nashville. And I was just like so moved. It was so healing for me. These girls like came up to me. Their moms knew my Instagram. They were like asking to take photos. Now I know like what it feels like to be a celebrity for a moment. And like 3 people, you know, that was really cool. And I was like, how can I do something with these girls? I need to plan something. And so July was Disability Pride. And I was like, we have to put something on the books. We can make it small. So we just, you know, rented out a space. I asked any brands that wanted to get involved. And we had this little I wanted to create like a little influencer suite for them. They were like ages 4 to 12. They probably came into the room and were like, but what do we do? Like, and I was like, you get to go shopping. And they were like, okay, like, is there toys? And I'm like, there's dresses and shoes and a photo booth. It was like, that shows how much I don't know about kids, but it ended up being super fun. I mean, they got like glitter in their hair and got to do braids and crimping and play dress up. So it was really special, I think, just for them to get to see each other and get to be around other girls who looked like them. But it was super fun. And so now I'm sort of like, how can I do more of that? You know, how can I do that in other cities? Do that for teens, for adults? Like I've never gotten to be around adults with limb differences, like, you know, my age, who are into the same things, who are into fashion. I'm kind of like, where to next? Hopefully, you know, I'll figure it out.
And there's a lot of great content on your feed. People have to go watch the videos of you interviewing these little girls. It's just the cutest thing. I am really excited to see where it goes next because I could see, first of all, that pop-up being something that pops up on tour in lots of different places. I could see brands getting involved in a really big way and you really blowing that out.
I hope so. If anybody hears
that would be great.
Wants to help me out, let me know.
Calling all brands. My last topic of discussion here has nothing to do with your limb difference. I just need to know. You have my dream style. I would describe your fashion sense as absolutely the thing that I gravitate towards. And I've had different style moments in my life. I feel like I had a moment where I was all neutral and basic in terms of wearing basics, whites and tans. And I entered this moment probably 6 months ago where I all of a sudden was like, give me all the color, give me the patterns, the mix matching. And that is currently my area where I cannot get enough. However, when I see an influencer like you who wears the cutest outfit, maybe it's like a mixing and matching pattern, I see you pull this outfit together and it's almost like unless I buy those exact 2 pieces that you're wearing in that, I can't guarantee it's going to work. But I feel like people like you are born with the ability to figure out what those pieces are and to pull from random places. How do you pick these mix matching things? Like, how does your brain work with fashion when you wake up in the morning or if you're shopping? What are you looking for? Like, can you give me all the tips?
I've really started to lean into my personal style in the last few years. It's like going into your closet and the first thing that you gravitate towards, like probably just like pull it out, figure out how you can wear it. Cause I'll go through like 10 other things and then I'll always go back to the first thing. With mixing and matching patterns, I always try to make sure that like the colors are pulled together or complement in some kind of way, or big pattern with small pattern, like sizing, making sure they're not like the same size pattern. I have a like really close friend here who's a stylist and she has helped me so much just with like little tricks of like, you need to wear a small heel with that or, balancing things, I think, mixing metals like in the right way. So you totally can do it. We have very similar style, I would say, like wearing color and also like I like to wear neutrals too. I think like in the right way. Like I love edgy like rock and roll style too. So I think I can definitely like dress up like a black and red moment. I think there are like tricks of the trade though.
So you do think there are rules. It's not just like go wild and express yourself, but there are some parameters.
Not rules, but guidelines, like things that help you, I think.
I've heard people call it the sandwich rule, where it's almost like you put on a shirt and then make sure that your shoes match the vibe of the shirt, but then the pants or the bottom can be totally outlandish.
Sure, yeah. And really, I think I don't want to say that there are rules because forcing yourself to think outside the box has helped me so much. Like I used to be very much like if I'm having a fun top, I'd be like the jeans girl. And now I'm like, wait, what about skirts? What about short or what about long? Like just try it and see if it works. And I think that's like the great part about the age we're in now is there are less and less rules as like all these micro trends come about, but people are really also talking about personal style. So I think it's like great to clash and be yourself. Like I love like Caroline Vazana's style. Like she has such great personal style.
One of my favorite follows who I think you might be following too is Vicky, I don't know if I'm going to say her last name right, Montinari, something like that.
In Portugal?
Yes, she is in Europe. And she, first of all, as a mom in the suburbs on the East Coast of the US, I just don't have the same climate as she has to begin with in terms of the types of outfits she's wearing. But I look at her outfits and I think, well, this season, this is the time for me. It's summer. This is when I can wear these European beach outfits. But I'm also pregnant. Everything is working against me right now. But I do find that people like you and her, I look at your outfits and I think I want that exact thing because I don't think my brain could pull together my own version of that. But in the past, anytime I've put together an outfit that I really like something that is really making me happy, oftentimes my mindset, I have to say, of pulling it together is what would be the weirdest thing I could wear here? Or what would my twin sister, who has a very chic, simple style, what would she say? No, do not put that together. And that's what I go with. And that's what I like.
Yeah. I think it's like what's going to get me like a compliment on the street from some random person.
And it is good that fashion at the end of the day, it's just about what makes you happy and makes you feel good. And I am a genuine believer in the fact that your inner confidence wearing something is what makes others think that it looks good on you.
100%.
More so than the actual pieces themselves. But I do struggle with making content that's specifically fashion related because then I start to feel like I'm being the authority here and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel like that. Like I felt like that too. Like, is this an outfit? Like, can I say this is like a formula to build an outfit? Like I did like, you know, the boxers that everyone is wearing right now. I was like,
Yes.
can I say this is like a cool girl formula? I don't know. Like, I'm not a stylist, but do people go to school for styling? Not really. Like, it's kind of just something that's innately in you.
You did look cool in the boxers.
You would look great in boxers.
I got to go get some of those. I can't fit in them right now, but I got to go get some of those striped boxers.
In a
Those
couple
are
weeks.
cute right now. Before you posted about adaptive clothing, it had never crossed my mind that brands would be making this kind of clothing, although it feels like even for someone without a disability, adaptive clothing is easy and good. I want you to talk a little bit about it because one of my favorite brands for babies is this brand called Magnetic Me. And it's these little onesies that are just magnetic snaps. And it makes life as a parent so much easier. And so can you tell us about the adaptive clothing world and what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of brands are starting to talk about adaptive, which is basically just clothing that's more universal for people with disabilities. But yeah, to what you're saying, really for anybody. I mean, but yes, it's created for a wide range of people with disabilities. So a lot of those features would be like swapping out buttons for magnetic closures or really easy zippers instead of like buttons on the jeans or wide necklines. Anthropologie just launched their first adaptive line, and I think brands are starting to talk about it. I mean, honestly, it'd be great for pregnancy too.
Definitely.
It's cool to see. I think most disabled people would say that they don't shop adaptive, myself included. I've never shopped adaptive my whole life. And so I'm excited to see like what happens and what brands start to do. I think a lot of the adaptive clothing that exists out there right now is not for the modern day fashion girl. And so I think that's why a lot of disabled women that I follow who are in this space, models, creators, artists, whatever, don't wear adaptive clothing, because we're like first and foremost fashion girls who are always interested in like style over function. And a lot of adaptive clothing has looked very like medical or drab in the past. It's kind of like depressing. So I think it's cool to see the shift of, you know, Anthro really being one of the first to come out with something that's cool. It exists on the same product page as their other pants. So like you would see a petite or plus, you would see adaptive on the same page. It's not like called out on a specific page for disabilities.
I love that. And I feel like it's useful for everyone. It's the type of thing that even people without a disability would want, that because it's just convenient.
Yeah. And I think if that's how it's marketed, like that's maybe the way it's going to succeed, is not necessarily being targeted for people with disabilities who a lot of the time are just actively trying to be seen as normal. So if it's more positioned as like universal, I think that's the way that it's really going to win.
Well, April, thank you so much for coming on. I love this discussion. I hope that you didn't find that it was just another conversation about my limb difference. And
not at all.
I really do admire everything you're doing. I find your content so aspirational and absolutely watch it for fashion, beauty tips. And also, I just am fascinated with a person who is so resilient and who just goes through life with half as many hands as I have and is doing all the same things. And so can you tell people where they can find you and however you want to describe your platforms to get people over there?
Pretty much April Lockhart on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Yeah, you can just find me there. But this was amazing. I love all that you do and how thoughtfully you approach all these conversations. And I think it's important to talk about.
Thank you. It was so great talking. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Real Stuff. I'm Lucie Fink. Don't forget to follow the show on social media at The Real Stuff Pod. And if you're liking these episodes, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a written review. It helps the show so much. And if you're feeling called to come on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. We'll see you next week for another intimate conversation on The Real Stuff.